Today, with AJW and Wolfie, we're talking about who is the GOAT male of Western states. Is it Scott Jurek or is it Jim Walmsley? And that's what we're going to debate today. So before we go any further, AJW, it's 5 a.m. in Arizona, and you are joining me while it's 1 p.m. in France. So thank you and welcome. I'm glad that you're here today.
Thanks, man. It's great to be on, and I think this is a super fun concept. You know me; I think about Western states all year round, and I haven't even run it for more than a decade. So,
to your point, you've run it. I don't want to get it wrong. How many times have you run Western states?
10 times.
That's what I thought. So you've got the special belt buckle.
I do. I do have a special belt buckle.
Wolfie, how many times have you run Western
0.
states? All right. We can all still dream though, right? All right. So the format is going to be, we are going to have opening statements, Wolfie taking the position of Walmsley, and then AJW with his rebuttal or his opening statements at 5 minutes. And then they'll both get 3 minutes, and then they're going to discuss for a while, and then they're going to have closing arguments. So today I came prepared because I tell you, this was an absolute joy last time. So I needed popcorn. I'm going to sit back. I'm going to go on mute. You're only going to hear me when the bell dings, or if I feel like you guys are getting boring, I'll do something to kind of liven it up a little bit, but I'm actually not terribly worried about this. So Wolfie, are you ready?
Yeah, let's get it on.
All right, let me get the timer going here, and as soon as I say go, you've got 5 minutes, and when it dings, you're done mid-sentence. All right, you ready?
Yep.
Go.
Well, so I know it's 5 a.m. We're both here, in the Phoenix suburb, but I would be remiss, right? This is a special moment for me. I probably won't get invited on Crack a Brew with AJW, so it's 5 a.m. We got to at least crack something. Let's get that thing going, right? Cheers, boys.
Oh, man. That's great. Cheers.
And, AJW, what a legend. I've been into the sport, since the early 20 teens, and he was already, a household namesake within the sport. And I just love the opportunity to come in and have a little fun banter debate surrounding a great topic of two elites, two legends in the sport, right? And, I think that's where I want to start with all of this is that, we've got Crack a Brew with AJW, and we're here to talk about Walmsley and Jurek. And we don't have anything called Take a Sip with Jurek, right? Like there is no content around Scott. And I think that's where legacy and lore start to take a fork at the road. So there's much lore around Jurek, but I don't know that he's got the legacy that Walmsley's building. We can get into records and things like that, and it starts to go down the same path of other sports where you're comparing guys like Bill Russell to Michael Jordan, and it just gets into how many rings or how many Cougars do you have. And I don't think that's a winning, strategy for AJW. I think legacy is built on the ability for future generations to go back and experience the greats of the game. And I think one of Jim's biggest, what makes him such a legend at Western States is him, I think, giving space for Jurek to be reintroduced to this new generation of Western States fans and ultra runners. I think it was kind of Walmsley's, ode to Jurek with that first, Dry Max, holy shirt that he wore, where everybody kind of was able to go back and get schooled on who this was that was kind of inspiring, Jim. And we don't know if Jim was doing it like in good faith because he truly admired the legend, or if he was kind of, thumbing his nose at the old guard saying, I'm here and, you guys are going to have a problem to deal with. And he made good on his bones. He's got four Cougars, all sub 15 hours. He's got the course record. He's got results that are just, head and shoulders above even his peers today and contemporaries in generations before him. So I think that's, just the opening statement that I want to make to everyone is that making sure that we define what legacy is and how it differentiates from lore. And, I think I'll turn it over to AJW and going to have fun with this one. I already got one sip of an IPA in at 5 a.m., so we're good.
We are already setting records with this podcast. This is the earliest beer we've ever had on the podcast.
It's a Founders Day. It's an all-day IPA, so it's less than 5%, so we're okay. I'll still be able to go to work.
All right. We're safe. All right, AJW. Wolfie came in under 5 minutes. He has deferred some time. So here we go. You ready for your 5 minutes?
I am. Let's go. What a great tribute there, Wolfie. And I want to start by saying, both of these guys are friends of mine. I go back with Scott back to the late 90s. He used to come out and run Angeles Crest. Probably know back then there were only a handful of 100-milers, and Angeles Crest was on the Pantheon along with Western States and Leadville. And so I got to know him a little bit during that time. And of course, I've gotten to know Jim too. I, in fact, just interviewed him on Saturday. He came out to Mesquite Canyon 50K to do a little tune-up race, and I was covering it for Aravaipa. On the question of greatest of all time, I mean, I am a little bit I'm a little bit indifferent about being not assigned, but taking the Jurek position here, because in his last Western States in 2005, he and his seventh win, he didn't realize it at the time, but I was in second place. And instead of doing the gentlemanly thing and letting me win, he went ahead and won, and forever prevented me from ever having a cougar in my house. And for God's sake, he has seven of them. Watching all seven of those, some from the sidelines and some from like right in the arena. The thing that separates Jurek from Jim is that with each successive win at Western States, more and more competitors were gunning for him. Back then, it was a who's who of competitors who were trying to unseat him. It was the early days of people coming over from Europe. I remember Vincent Delabarre, who was a legendary French runner, coming over and just basically aping Jurek through the entire high country, just running step for step with him, taking a pee when he took a pee, looking at the view when he looked. And of course, eventually Jurek just dropped him. Most especially, I remember the 2004 race. Dave Mackey at the time was the preeminent American sub 100-mile runner. He was winning everything at 50K, 50-mile, 100K. He finally came over to run the 100-mile distance in 2004. And literally, at Michigan Bluff, they were stride for stride. Mackey was really lit a fire under Jurek. And ultimately, it was the reason I remember sitting in the award ceremony afterwards and Jurek basically thanking Mackey. Mackey ended up finishing second by not too far back, 25 minutes or so, for making it such a competitive race, and essentially the reason that at that time Scott's finish there was the course record. I think too we need to remember that Jurek was running in an era. So he's got all these guys gunning for him every single year. He was also living in an era where shoes were very rudimentary. He ran for Montrail much of the time, and big clunky Vitesse shoes. Kind of we're still in the Wild West in terms of nutrition and what you're eating. And of course, Scott's legendary for being a vegan, so he had to be very creative with his nutrition. And even the Western States course itself, as someone who knows the course very well, it was a lot more rugged and remote back in that period than it is now. Keep in mind that over the last decade, especially since Craig Thornley's been the race director, the trail work on that course, it is basically a highway through the mountains. And back in Jurek's years, it was still sort of kind of rough and rugged. There were sections that were really difficult even to navigate. Several of his wins were in really snowy years. And the fact that each and every time he was expected to win, he did win, except for 2005, when arguably I was expected to win. But nonetheless, we'll give Jurek his time. He was an incredible champion. Now, we could be having this interview 5 years from now, and Walmsley might have 7 cougars on his mantle, and Walmsley might run sub 14 hours this year and give the same speech to someone else who pushes him to a sub 14 this year. We can't. Oh, my time's up.
I could never mute you though, AJW. As I was thinking, am I going to have to mute him? I can't do it. I don't know you well enough yet, and I respect you too much. I'm not going to mute you. I will just say I'm a moderator. I'm indifferent. I will say everything that you just described about why Jurek and the course and like it's rugged and it was before the gear. I got pumped on that. Okay, that's it. That's all I have to say. I'm not saying no one's winning yet. Wolfie, you ready for your 3 minutes? Okay, go.
Yeah, so AJW makes great points there, and he does sit in this era that I think Josh and we both romanticize about when maybe it was a simpler sport, it was a lot more rugged, dirtbagged, but I think Jurek's still within that context. He kind of sits up against like an Anton who kind of took the mantle of like Trail Jesus or Trail Dirtbag, right? Like when you think of, again, it comes back to content, and I think there's no debate that Jurek is a proven champion. He's the greatest champion of Western States, but we're talking legacy. And I think legacy has to be reciprocal. And I don't know Scott. I've never met him, talked to him or anything. And just, I don't get the sense that maybe he wanted to be the legacy. I think he kind of ducked out, or there wasn't, maybe the podcast scene or the live stream built out yet. And so he kind of disappeared for a generation when I was coming into the sport. And it's now that he's kind of being reintroduced, 20 years after, his last victory. And so there's still time for him, I think, to establish legacy. But I think it's at right now, this point where, he is a bit of an unknown. Like the content are these time capsules. Like for Walmsley, you can go back and look at, Lost on 49, the Light My Fire series, countless podcast interviews, the iconic I Run Far interview with his feet in the river, right? Like there's just so many of these things that are archived, forever for new fans getting into the sport. And even as we try to do due diligence and get back into, the era with Scott and such, like if you Google or YouTube him, you actually find Scott and it's not him finishing at Placerville High. So it's hilarious that the one YouTube video I find when I Google Scott Jurek is some other random Scott, probably finishing within the 29th hour, not actually, the champion, the GOAT. So, again, I think that's it's different for me with how I look at sports and fandom and think about the greats. And it's just crazy because, like Jerry West, he's the logo of the NBA, but it's obviously Michael Jordan, the jump man. Like Michael Jordan is culturally basketball, but you got Jerry West as the logo. And I feel like that's the analogy with how Western States is, where Jurek is the logo or Jurek has the Cougars, but Walmsley for all purposes right now is, setting the culture. And he's doing it during the time when more eyes are on the sport. And so I think he's got the bigger legacy and the higher ceiling for it to even grow further. That's it.
Perfect timing. All right, AJW, you ready?
Yep.
Go.
All excellent points on the impact of how technology and information and all of that has impacted runners' visibility. I will say, though, one of the things that I was always impressed with Jurek, I think most people know this, he was notorious in that his preparation for Western States, and he typically came out to the course about 6 weeks before the race. He stayed with Shannon Weil, who was on the board at the time, one of the 4 founders of Western States, in her house outside Michigan Bluff. She doesn't live there anymore. He one of his dogs died. He even buried his dog on Shannon Weil's property. He really, really embedded himself in the culture and community of the American River Basin, where people knew him. Locals knew who Scott Jurek was, even if he knew the horseback riders. He knew the residents who lived in Michigan Bluff, who would fill his water bottles there. He was a part of the community, and he was the first champion. I think this is who would, go back to his hotel, take his shower, and return, at the 27, 28, 29 hour mark and cheer in those final finishers. Every year he won, he would do that. And it was so impressive to sort of see that. This is not to say that Jim doesn't do that. Of course, it was famously, Rob Krar went out to do that and ended up running in with Gunhild Swanson back in 2015 to that legendary golden hour finish with just 6 seconds left on the clock. So Scott was knit into the community, and yes, he did just fade away. You have to keep in mind, though, in 2006, he mentored Brian Morrison, who was essentially the heir apparent. And sadly, Brian ended up not finishing as he famously collapsed on the track after leading from Forest Hill to that point with Scott pacing him. And at that point, Scott really had to distance himself from the race. And indeed, in recent years, he has returned. He has become, part of the race, similar to the way Ann Trayson did. But you have to imagine after having something so big in your life, winning it 7 consecutive times, it's understandable why you would need a little sort of psychological and emotional break from it. And it's great to see that Scott is back, and he knows he has befriended Jim, and they really are, two champions in their own right. But the way in which Scott embedded himself in that local community, especially, really, really impressed not only me, but everybody in that area.
Nailed it with 4 seconds to spare. Okay, before we go into just the back and forth discussion part, I want to do my best to give high level and just, as a hope for summarizing, but then it also gives you guys something to bounce off of. If I'm like, oh, Josh got it wrong, this is what I'm saying, whatever. I'm hearing AJW's case being that not only the 7 victories, the 7 Cougars consecutive, but also the way that Jurek is ingrained into the heritage and legacy of the race puts him, at GOAT status for Western States. And Wolfie's case is that, yes, that may be true. He is ingrained in the heritage of it, but the modern runner, the modern ultra runner and ultra fan wouldn't quite know about any of that sort of stuff unless you really are digging deep and trying to geek out on it. Unless Jim Walmsley hadn't reintroduced it with that outfit, the Drymax outfit that really, and so Wolfie, this is where maybe your launch point is. Jurek so well known because of Jim Walmsley's recent success, and with the growth of the sport being what it is, Jim Walmsley has been such a big figure that then his success has allowed this generation to, that's the only way that this generation has known about Jurek. Okay, discuss.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying, right? Like it's well said, with among the sport, greats, that we stand on the shoulders of giants. And I think that's what Jim has been able to do, right? Is that for the longest time, Jurek's been there, maybe uncelebrated, or recognized, or, invited into, some of these conversations. And you are starting to see, the podcast, talking heads reach out to him, and he is reciprocal now, and he is more accessible, and you get more cuts from him. He's doing time on the live stream now at Western States, which is great to see. And I think, there's stories that you get to hear on these podcasts about him. He's very, I think, unassuming, right? He doesn't make it at all about him. He wants to allow the race to continue on without always acknowledging and recognizing him in some sort of way, which is admirable. Like he'll just randomly show up at, I think one of the final aid stations, right, with Hal. And, those are some of the greatest stories you hear when these guys are riffing on podcasts. So I love that, right? And I'm hearing that. And so absolutely, I think that, maybe again, the media infrastructure has been built. He's at a place where in his life and with the race that he's comfortable coming back. And I think that's great. And it just kind of coincides like what you said, right? It was the rise of Walmsley, and, without Walmsley, I don't know. We'll never know what Western States would look like. I'm sure it would look similar, but I just, he's such a polarizing figure and came into the sport in such a unique way, at least with cameras in front of his face. And I think, I'm curious to ask AJW this question. I'm only putting him on the spot because he's proven himself to be an almanac of Western States knowledge. So when Jim won that 2021 Western States with that 14:46, and his second place, Tyler Green, was 16:11, he put 2 hours on Cody Lynn and Tim Tollefson. And he was 3 hours ahead of Hayden Hawks, who finished 8th male. That to me is one of the most impressive Western States runs, just in comparison to your peers on that given day. what was that something that Jurek was doing as well in his era, where he was putting 2 hours on? He didn't put 2 hours on you, so I know that. So what were some of those finishes that that Jurek has that kind of stands out like that?
No, he never blew a field away like Jim did in 2021. But at the risk of getting a jab in, he also never missed one of the most likely to miss turns in the entire race. You know, everybody who should know that you have to make the left-hand turn off of Corey Road onto the Corey Trail, or you're going to go all the way to the road. And even Jim himself would say he became famous as an ultra runner because of his failure, because of his initial failure at the race. And this is something that endears him so much to people, right? Is that he came out with this Muhammad Ali kind of attitude. I'm the greatest. I'm going to break the course record. I don't care, you know. And then, you know, for 2 years, you know, he had a rough time out there. He missed the turn, which everybody knows you shouldn't miss. I mean, it's the most obvious turn in the entire race. And this, of course, was after he let go of the rope crossing the river and started, you know, drifting down the river. So you knew, like, man, what's up with this guy? You know, he's letting go of the rope and now he's missing a turn. And then, of course, the following year, he has such audacity to go into the race in a very big snow year after they've completely decommissioned the trails in the high country, and it's muddy, and it's, you know, where he just, you know, he goes, you know, throws caution to the wind, runs through that at course record pace, and of course ends up dropping out at the river crossing because he just ran out of gas. And you know, and he for the second year in a row basically gave the win at that time to Ryan Sands, the first year to Andrew Miller, and then of course he finally got it right on the third time. So I do think the dominant performance in 2021 after the cancellation in 2020, it was a big field in 2021 because it was 2 years worth of golden ticket winners and everything else, and he just blew the doors off everybody. I think what Jim did is that Scott didn't do is he just went from the gun, you know, will notoriously have like a 8-minute lead over the escarpment. Scott was much more of a Killian type runner where he would sort of see where the rest of the field was and be tactical about it, you know, right away. And so you never really did see those dominant. I think he might have won one by over an hour, but, you know, like mine was 27. One of his wins over Tom Nielsen, excuse me, was 24. I mean, his wins were, excuse me, in that range.
Awesome. Yeah, when you go back and I was researching it, that was just one of the ones that stuck out with such a huge gap there. Did you think that when Jurek ran that 15:36, he got everything out of the course, or were conditions that day challenging as well, and he just never put his best day on the best calendar weather day?
No, I think it was a 2000. I remember 2004. It was a really benign weather year. We were able to cross the river on foot. It was a medium snow year. I think 15:36 was. I mean, of course, and of course, the times. It's really hard to compare the times back then to the times now. In large part, I think because of more high level athletes coming into the sport than were in 20 plus years ago. They were staying in marathoning longer. They were staying in track longer. They didn't know anything about the sport. You know, but remember, he took down Mike Morton's course record, which was back from 1997. So there was that was a pretty good gap, for an ultra running world, a 7-year course record, and he was really just kind of trying to sort of chip away. But I think that Scott was, with the exception of 2004, he was less concerned in his heyday with course records and more concerned with simply winning. For example, I'm embarrassed to say this because it was the year I got second, but he definitely took the foot off the accelerator in 2005 because he was running Badwater 3 weeks later. And so, once he knew that the only person behind him was me, he was like, I got this in the bag. He just kind of jogged it in. And I don't think Jim was ever going to jog it in. I mean, I guess he sort of jogged it in that year. He missed the turn. But that's not his style.
Right. Yeah, that's fascinating. That sounds a lot like how track and field kind of ebbs and throws with, are we chasing, world records, or are we trying to, chase victories at the most prestigious races? So, yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny to hear that's also, what you see within our sport as well, where you have some champions that, chase course records, and you have other ones that are just looking to get the W on that day and, save their legs as best they can for the next race. And you guys were racing so many more races on the calendar year that it would make sense that if you've got it in the bag, at least, to coast in that last 10, 20K. So, and then so post like 2005, 2006, Scott goes into Spartathlon. Is that kind of then what he becomes eye on the prize type? So he's still contributing, high quality results on major races, and that one's international. That it's international, right?
Yeah. Well, keep in mind too, he won and set a course record at Hard Rock, which really turned some heads. That was in 2007, so 2 years after. He won and set a course record at Hard Rock. In fact, fun little tidbit, he was the first person on the cover of Ultra Running magazine in color. Up until July of 2007, Ultra Running magazine was an all black and white magazine. And after winning and setting the course record at Hard Rock in 2007, he was on the cover. He did go on to do the Spartathlon and won it in under 24 hours shortly after that, and still came back to California and ran some of the short, the sub hundreds. He would run Way Too Cool every year. He would run Miwok 100K every year, but he did have this focus on those races. And then, of course, he was one of the more early American men to go over to UTMB and not do well. In 2009, he went over to UTMB and finished, a pedestrian 17th place. But I want to go back to one thing as well too about there is a fascinating bridge between Jurek and Walmsley, which are three of the guys who won the race in the years in between, and really were moving the needle as the needle was being moved. If you follow me here, you have Rob Carr, you have Timothy Olsen, and you have Jeff Rose. Okay, and of course, Jeff Rose was featured prominently along with Anton in the Unbreakable film from the 2010 film, the 2010 race that came out in 2011 that, in my opinion, along with Born to Run, was the thing that fueled the trail and ultra running boom that we're still living through today, right? I mean, you've got Anton living out of the van and his ethos. You have Jeff Rose, this kind of mysterious guy from Alaska who just sort of came in and dominated the sport for like 15 months. And then, notoriously just, got overtraining system and sort of disappeared from the sport. And Timothy Olsen, who was kind of from the Hal Corner, Oregon school of trail and ultra running, to win a couple races and bring the course record down, below 15 hours for the first time in 2012 when it was really cold. And so it's there was a bridge, right? And it went from this sort of unassuming, typical upper Midwest kind of crunchy granola vegan dude, to Walmsley, this kind of Muhammad Ali, coming from a track background, and that bridge in between. I mean, let's face it, that was when very rudimentary sort of videos and YouTube things were coming out. And, of course, everybody wanted to have their picture with Anton. And as he's going, running 200-mile weeks in bare feet and stuff like this. So it was a time where if you look back on it now, it's like, wow, those were some heady times. And it was like, as Jurek was leaving the sport and before Walmsley was in there, it was an interesting era. And it was kind of those were the years that I was still running Western States, but not as competitive anymore. And I was just sort of seeing it happen in real time where it was like, wow, this is This is different. I mean, just the pre-race briefing in and of itself. If you were to look at a time-lapse photo of the Western States pre-race briefing from 1999 when Jurek first ran the race, to 2018 when Jim finally won it. I mean, just that in and of itself would be an incredible sort of picture of the way the sport exploded.
Absolutely. Yeah, that we didn't get enough of that era of the Anton, Timothy Olsen, and Rob Krar. It was too short-lived. It could have lasted another 5 to 7 years for my liking. That's when I was really getting into it. I was on fire for Rob Krar. He was my guy. I mean, the Nathan Vapor Krar vest, I had to have it. And Timothy Olsen had, again, he just had that aesthetic that was just so alluring. He had the story that was, from addiction and overcoming and, to becoming this champion athlete in this sport that's so, just, it's like a warrior going out into battle, and it's, these guys were definitely building the foundation for then Walmsley to come in and just kind of, cash it all in basically. So great points.
Yeah.
We're having fun with this one, man. The debate then turns into just reminiscing and, trying to absorb as much, of the knowledge from the scholar over here. So, Josh, what do you got? I mean,
all right, before I give you your closing arguments, I just have to ask this question. There's so many discussions these days where it feels like maybe we're in a simulation. Life is someone's pulling the strings and who knows how we are, where we are. What would the ultra running world be like? AJW, this question's for you. If Jim didn't miss that turn, would it be any different? I just feel like, would we have a real jerk at the top? With Walmsley's attitude, if he had delivered that day, do you think he would be a different person, or did that wrong turn change him?
Oh, it absolutely changed him. I gotta say, so the first time I met Jim, it was at the 2014 JFK 50. Back then, Ian Torrance of Flagstaff, Arizona. Now he lives in South Dakota. Every year would bring out to JFK, 3 or 4 ringers from Flagstaff, because one of the things JFK has is a team competition, and he would bring 3 or 4 runners out, and they would run in the team competition. And he brought Jim out in 2014, and Jim, ran really well at the race that year. And we're hanging out at the bar afterwards. And Eric Senseman is there and some of these other characters from the Flagstaff scene. And, Jim was just recently out of the Air Force Academy. And he was basically this cocky military kid is the way I receive. I mean, great guy, but he just, and Ian's an old grizzled veteran and I'm kind of an old grizzled veteran. We're like, who the hell is this kid? And so I do think then in the subsequent, he finally gets to Western States in 2016. He comes in with this Muhammad Ali attitude. I absolutely do think both of them, the wrong turn and then throwing caution to the wind. It would be one thing if he had learned his lesson from making one mistake, but the fact that he made 2, but the video of him running through Forest Hill, where he's just like floating on air and people have never seen anybody run at like 6-minute pace through Forest Hill, took on so much of a life of its own that it didn't really even matter that he missed the turn, or that it didn't really matter that he was puking at Forest Hill the next year and had to drop out at the river crossing, because the mystique was there. I think where the sport would really be different is if he never did it. If after that he just was like, well, maybe I'm not cut out for running 100 milers, and then he just went away. But he didn't do that, right? He came back and finally got it right in 2017. And I think the lesson there, right, is that there's something human about making a mistake, screwing it up, and coming back and making it right. I really believe Western States gives people plenty of opportunities, if they want to be patient, to work hard and come back and make it right. And that's not just for the winners. That's for people who might miss the cutoff one year or get lost or get really sick and have to drop out or get injured. Yes, they have to wait a long, long time perhaps to get back in from the lottery or something. But Western States does give people an opportunity for redemption. And that's something Jim had that, I mean, Jurek never dropped out. Well, he did drop out of Western States when he came back that one year in 2009 to try to, run it again. But he never dropped out. He never missed a turn. It was sort of just like, autopilot. Oh, Jurek's in the race. He's going to win. So it didn't have any sort of allure and excitement like well, is Jim gonna do it again? And you never know. And even going into this year, right? Going into this year's race, the field, as you said at the outset, it's not set yet, but it's pretty well set. And it's going to be a super competitive race. And he's going to be pushed, maybe like he hasn't been pushed before. Although Rod Farvard pushed him pretty hard last year. I think it'll be interesting to see when the dust settles on the 2025 race, what happens. My hope is that it's really snowy and really hot. I think the best years are when the conditions are most adverse and they test runners, the most in the most kind of unexpected ways. And that would be my hope for this year. Hot, and really snowy.
Oh, I love it. Okay, I'm going to give you both 60 seconds. Final 60 seconds to make your case for your guy. All right, Wolfie, you go first.
All right. Well, yeah, I mean, I think we kind of stumbled on it here as we were piecing the conversation together. I mean, I think Jurek is a champion's champion, and Jim's a legend. And I think it was just for all those, cultural explanations that I gave, references to just the pieces of content that you can get to really absorb the full story of Jim for generations to come. And I think Scott now, later in his career, are putting those pieces in place. And so maybe that legendary status is still being written right now. We've alluded to it before, but when you do find Jurek, he's in like a very supporting role cast. He's in the bonus footage for Unbreakable. So he takes kind of an afterthought there. You have to hang on to the bonus features to get a glimpse of him. Again, his most iconic YouTube video is on the unfortunate finish there at Placerville that, again, nobody wants to go see that as their claim to fame at Western States. And so, yeah, I mean, we're talking about two guys who obviously, need no explanation for what they've accomplished as champions. So we'll leave it there.
AJW?
That's good, Wolfie. I think I agree as the conversation is unfolded. Maybe it's this. Maybe Jurek is the greatest champion of all time, and maybe Walmsley is the greatest personality of all time, right? I mean, maybe, although Anton could make an argument, by the way, for the greatest personality. Maybe that's another debate, who could possibly be more of a poster boy for the sport than Anton Kupichka. But I do think Jim's path through the sport, because it was uneven, because it had its fits and starts, it had its failures. There's something more human about it, and the fact that it was done with cameras in front of cameras in front of him all the time. I've mentioned several. I mean, from the time I first ran Western States in 2001 to the last time in 2014, there were so many more cameras on the course. Just in that period. Now it's tripled from 2014 to now. So you can't hide at Western States. And maybe that's ultimately where we're going, is one's a great champion, the other's a great champion, and influential personality.
And one last thing, Josh.
I mean,
as a kid that grew up in California, now lives in Arizona, and we're talking about the greatest U.S. 100-miler, I'm just glad we don't have to consider Killian in this conversation. He pretty much ducked Western States, for the last 15 years, or any other European. This is an American race, and we're talking about two great Americans. So I think that's a win right there for me. I
agree.
Well, AJW, thank you. Absolute treat and pleasure to, I hear your voice on all of the live streams, all that sort of stuff. Been reading your articles for years, so it's fun to actually get to engage with you. And of course, you delivered on the, as Wolfie said, as the almanac of Western States. Hope we can do something like this again. Maybe we'll even see you at Western States this year. But before we go, just want to say a proper thank you. I'm glad you did this with us.
Absolutely.
Well, it was great to come on, and I didn't really know how it was going to work out, but it was certainly fun to sort of turn on the Wayback Machine a little bit. As most people know, I never grow tired of talking about Western States, and I'll be back out there again, kind of doing a little bit of everything. That's one of my annual pilgrimages that I'll never miss.
And what else can we point people to? I know you're writing for I Run Far as you always have. You have your own podcast. We'll link that in the show notes. Anything else you got going on?
Well, I'm diving into my first ever 200-mile plus race myself. I'm running the Cocodona 250 in 8 weeks, literally 8 weeks from today, because it's a Monday start. And so, it's funny. I've been talking to my wife about this. I've been in the sport 29 years, and you would have thought that there was no new experience for someone who's been in this sport that long. But this is definitely a new experience for me, Cocodona. And so I'm training for it, and I'm going to be out there for a long time. But I'll probably talk a little bit about that more on Crack a Brew with AJW, just as I'm sort of experimenting with what it means to be a 200-mile hiker.
Well, that'll be fun. We'll be paying attention to that, and I can't wait to watch that unfold. Cocodona, of course, won't be the same without you on the microphone, but it'll be fun to watch you out going for it. All right. Well, thanks again for joining us, and we'll have another stage debate soon and many other episodes ahead of us, but have a good day.